topic is, Are Sin, Disease, and Death Real? And I got new insights from this Bible lesson. It's just wonderful. Of course, we start out with praise of Lord. And then we have, Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good and hath redeemed us from our enemies. And of course, I put in that the enemies are sin, disease, and death. For he is a God of love. I put that in for mercy. And he is infinite and forever. Now, the responsive reading was most important to me because it came from Deuteronomy, a book that has fascinated me in Bible study. Deuteronomy is essentially the second law, what it means. And it came about in Jewish history because the Jews were going through, and this is about the 700s BCE, the Jews were going through a series of attacks. First, the Assyrians captured the northern kingdom. Of course, the Jews were then divided into two kingdoms, the kingdom of Israel, which was the northern kingdom, and the kingdom of Judah, which was the southern kingdom. And the Assyrians conquered, sent some into exile. Ones that remained in the northern kingdom, many of them married Assyrians, and their Jewishness became diluted, and they became known as the Samaritans. And that's one of the reasons that the Samaritans are looked down upon and not liked, because they are an adulterated kind of Judaism. But some escaped to the kingdom of Judah, but then Judah was conquered ultimately by the Babylonians. And we have exile for many years from the Babylonians. But the Babylonians allowed their captives, the Assyrians did not, to continue in their religion. They did not try to destroy the culture. They finally, and the Babylonian and the southern kingdom had been ruled by a Davidic king, where the northern kingdom had been ruled by a military group. Well, in the southern kingdom, many of the writings, etc., were brought down to the southern kingdom before it was conquered. And in the southern kingdom, there had been a series of terrible kings who went back to the worship of Baal and the groves in the high places, etc. And then there were reformer kings, Hezekiah, and finally Josiah was a reformer king. And during his reform, in the rebuilding of the temple, etc., in the rebuilding of the people's hearts, supposedly they found a book of the laws of Moses in the temple, hidden away. And this was the book that essentially is Deuteronomy. It was declared that it was genuine, and it was a kind of strength that the Judeans held on to when they finally were conquered by the Babylonians and went into exile, many of them for many years. And because of this Deuteronomy, they have a refreshment of their cult beliefs in the one God, etc. So it is a reforming and refreshing book that they, when they returned finally to rebuild Judea, they had this Deuteronomy as a wonderful staff to lean upon. So it is the book of law, but it is law written after some changes had been made in the law and had more forgiveness built into the law. So it is a reforming and very helpful in overcoming many of the practices that were not followed as they should have been in Moses. So when you read the Deuteronomy, I'm sorry to spend so long at that, but the whole lesson is kind of governed by a look at the law from the viewpoint of sin, disease, and death, and what the law does to destroy that. So if you look at the Deuteronomic verses, verse 6, "For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God." This comes from Deuteronomy. "The Lord hath chosen thee to be a special people unto him, above all people that are upon the face of the earth." Now, what this is in the spiritual interpretation of the power of Deuteronomy and the direction of Deuteronomy is, for man is a spiritual creature. That is how Deuteronomy gives you a sense of the spiritual nature of man. And then that God is love. "The Lord did not set his love upon you, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any people. For ye were the fewest of all people at the time." That was true. "But the Lord loved you, and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn unto your fathers," that's the covenant, is being renewed in this Deuteronomy. And the covenant with God is our spiritual nature. The oath of his love, which is part of the covenant that he made with them, is the spiritualization, the realization of the nature of God, the nature truly of our neighbor, and our own nature as spiritual creatures. And the word bondman is in the last sentence of verse 8. "Redeemed you out of the household of bondmen, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt." We have been redeemed out of bondage to sin, disease, and death in this lesson, which is the bondmen that have been relieved from, as Mrs. Eddy says, enslaved by the education of the pharaohs she speaks of, to make the material world the world. Is what I'm saying making any sense? Okay. "Know therefore that the Lord thy God, he is God, the faithful God, which keepeth covenant and mercy with them that love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations." There is the pure statement of God is principle, mind, soul, spirit, life, truth, and love forever. And his offspring will feel that power to realize their spirituality. "In thee, O Lord," now we're in Psalms, "do I put my trust. Never let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in thy righteousness. Lord, let me see the true nature of God." Last verse. "Make thy face to shine upon thy servant. Save me for thy mercy's sake." And I've added that I may see myself as a reflection of you as your beloved child. So Deuteronomy is just a very special book as we'll see additionally as we study it. It is a reforming book. It is a book that brings us much closer, and it's in the Old Testament. And when Jesus said he came to fulfill the law, not to destroy it, there is so much good recorded in Deuteronomy that Judah had advanced to and was revealed in Deuteronomy, the direction that Jesus was going to take. We'll see that in, let's see, the first 2 sections handle sin. The next 2 handle disease, and the next last, and then death. The one in section 1, the sin is the sin of the woman who was taken in adultery, and the law said you had to stone her. Now, I got a whole new sense of this beyond the woman and to the crowd that was around her, that the power of this healing of sin went to the people round about. They were lifted from committing the sin by Jesus asking them who was free of sin, having them look into their own natures. Let him who is free of sin cast the first stone. It's kind of interesting that the sentinel for this lesson talks about the angry mob who brought the woman to Jesus had already taken a creative perspective on the law by bringing only the woman. The law called for both the man and the woman to be stoned. See Deuteronomy 22. Jesus demanded that they examine themselves to see if they were skirting or completely ignoring other laws. His forgiveness reached beyond the woman to transform the whole concept of sin held by this community. So the healing that took place involved every one of them there. He also says in the Sentinel, which I think is interesting for us to know about Jewish law, let's see, whether it applies to kill Jesus. We are forgiven our mistakes as we turn away from them. Okay. There's a part in here, and apparently I didn't underline it. Oh, here it is. Mankind's concept of forgiveness has developed and progressed over the millennia. Before the Torah, a perceived slight against a family member could start a blood feud against the accused family, with many lives lost on both sides. An eye for an eye, and the law allowing for those caught in adultery to be stoned, were actually limitations on the amount of retribution that was possible. You could no longer kill entire families, just those directly involved. So I think it's so wrong to recognize on what Jesus was stating, what he was referring to when he says, I have come to fulfill the law, not to destroy it. The law had begun to develop forgiveness and recognition of sin and return to God as the Almighty and spiritual maker. So, the concentration on the community roundabout. Usually Jesus puts out the community when he does the healing. But this time, he didn't look at them And he didn't tell them to go away, but he didn't look at them, which was a way of telling them to look at themselves, not at him. And the healing took place, or the advancement took place. Mrs. Eddy then speaks of until God strips off their disguise. The only reality of sin, sickness, or death is the awful fact that unrealities seem real to human erring belief until God strips off their disguise. Nothing is more antagonistic to Christian Science than a blind belief without understanding, for such a belief hides truth and builds on error. I looked at this also, this healing, as in its relationship to our election going on. That there must not be hatred in selection. The crowd was self-righteous. There was probably hatred also. Blindness and self-righteousness cling fast to iniquity. And so I apply it also to knowing that God is making the decision. God has made the decision of truth, life, and love as all that has created or produced anything in reality. And there's no place for hatred of person in this decision. We must pray, I think, to know that. And it came to me also, he that covereth his sins shall not prosper, but whoso confesseth and forsaketh them shall have mercy. According to the Sentinel article, the whole sense of this lesson is forgiveness. Their bold print is mankind's concept of forgiveness has developed and progressed over the millennia. So it seems it's about sin, disease, and death. It is, but it's about forgiveness in the positive sense. And then I applied it to myself and to individuals. Thy kingdom come, let the reign of divine truth, life, and love be established in me, and rule out of me all sin. And may thy word enrich the affections of all mankind and govern them. In this one instance, the power of the Christ did just that, bring us closer to the kingdom of heaven. Okay, I've waxed too long on that. The section 2 is the second half of that healing. I've spoken already. Isaiah was also the prophet who was attempting reformation for the Israelites who had gone so far away from God in the practice of getting into wars, not depending on God, but on political arrangements, and also the worship of Baal. So there's the book, Deuteronomy was a reformation, and Isaiah is a reformation quality. Break forth into joy in Isaiah. Sing together, ye waste places of Jerusalem, for the Lord hath comforted his people. He hath redeemed Jerusalem. I looked up Mrs. Eddy's definition of Jerusalem on page 589. Mortal belief and knowledge from the 5 corporeal senses, the pride of power and the power of pride, sensuality, envy, oppression, tyranny, And finally, home and heaven. That is the redeemed Jerusalem. The other one doesn't seem to be in very good shape. And we know also from history that finally, when the Persians defeated the Babylonians, where the Hebrews had been able to hold on to their religion because of reformation that had taken place before they were captured, Cyrus sent them home. The emperor of the Persians sent them home to rebuild their temple. And I think that was a result of the Reformation that they had gone through several reforming people and books. Okay. In Science and Health, in Section 2, this very clear set of statements about how we must recognize our spirituality. Thy kingdom come seems to me to summarize the Science and Health section. Thy kingdom come, let the reign of divine truth, life, and love be established in me, and rule out of me all sin, and may thy word enrich the affections of all mankind and govern them. Then we come to Section 3, which handles sickness or disease, and the relationship between sin and sickness. He was in Capernaum. There were so many people there when the sick of the palsy arrived. And he stated, as he healed him, when Jesus saw their faith, their receptivity, he said, thy sins be forgiven thee. And Mrs. Eddy hits right hard in the first part of Section 3 when she says, if sin, sickness, and death are as real as life, truth, and love, then that must be all from the same source. God must be their author. Now, Jesus came to destroy sin, sickness, and death. Yet the scriptures say, I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. And the last part of that section is kind of a 1, 2, 3 statement from Mrs. Eddy. 1, see the claim of sin and then destroy it. 2, unsee the error or unreality of the disease. Then you will not feel it, and it is destroyed. So you must uncover it. In fact, that's what Jesus did for the crowd around the woman. He uncovered the sin within them and got them to step forward. Okay. Section 4 is the argument over whether he has the right to forgive sin when he is healing a person physically. And it's very clear that the major sin is the belief of the Adam dream. And he states very clearly whether it is easier to say to the sick of the palsy, thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, arise and take up thy bed and walk. But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. Because the sin is the belief in material existence. that was a very clear and very comforting section in Mrs. Eddy, and it brought to me the statement in James, "Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. But we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And every one that hath his hope in him purifieth himself, even as he is pure." It's interesting to me in my reading of the lesson, and I don't know whether it's happened with others, that there are statements from the manual and statements from our Old Testament that just jump out as a summary of what has happened in the particular section. And so I just mentioned that. Now the overcoming of death. And of course it's most important, Mrs. Eddy's statement, that if Jesus had ever believed or had looked upon Lazarus as a mortal and had believed that he died as a mortal, he could never have resurrected him. That is the resurrection that I think is just so clear, that Mrs. Eddy's comforting Christian Science is based entirely upon the Master's teachings. Doesn't she say, "Follow me only so far as I follow him"? And in fact, this is very clearly that. She says in summary in section 5, "Outside of this science, all is mutable, but in mortal man, in accord with the divine principle of his being, God neither sins, suffers, nor dies." And it was very clear to me also why Jesus waited 4 days to come. Because there is let's see, what is it about the fourth day? Just hold that for a minute. Okay, here it is. Those who wanted to kill Jesus for blasphemy also wanted to kill Lazarus, because Lazarus was living proof that Jesus could not just do everyday healings, but extraordinary ones. When Jesus arrived, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. At that time, some believed that the soul lingered in a dead body for 3 days. Jesus' raising of Lazarus contradicted that superstition and pointed to a different definition of life. Life is the law of soul, even the law of spirit, of truth. That's from Mrs. Eddy. I was not aware of that superstition, that his soul could have been in there to be called forth. Jesus had to show that he never was dead. For 3 days or 4 days or 6 days or ever was he never lived in the body. So that was an insight that I had not had before, and really I was led to these insights by that Sentinel article in the most recent Sentinel, called "Proof That God Exists" is what's written on the front. It was just very helpful to me. Okay, in section 6, Jesus then continues with Mary and Martha and declares himself that he is the resurrection and the life, that he believeth on me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die, for we shall see our spiritual nature. Now, it was interesting also to me that in so many of the healings that Jesus did, he cleared away the people, as with Jairus' daughter, that he cleared away the people and went in with just a few, the parents and some disciples, to do the healing. But here, he did it right in front of all the people. And I've read some articles on Jesus' protection of the community as he preached. You'll recall that in so many of his healings, particularly in Mark, that he says, now, you've been healed, but don't go tell anybody. And that's always troubled people as to why he did that. But one of the reasons was that if it became so clear of what power he had in healing, that it would bring about a revolt among the people to make him king. And he knew that if that happened, the Romans or the Jews or the status quo was going to come down upon the people in some kind of civil war. And he protected them for a long time by trying not to have it announced. But by the time of the resurrection of Lazarus, I think he knew that he could only continue to do his mission to destroy all belief or all forgiveness. And it would mean his own destruction, that they would try to put him to death also. But that protection of the community, I think, is a lovely idea in Jesus' love and God's love operating through Jesus as the Christ. That with the woman in adultery, there was the help to the whole community to rise above sin through this experience. What he did to one individual also touched upon the community, but he was careful not to bring retribution or fear upon the community for some years. And then finally, when he overturned the money changers' tables, he drew the line in the sand, as it were. Because I think he saw that his disciples just didn't get it. And the resurrection was the only way for them to get it and have it retaught in the light of the resurrection. But now I'm going away from the lesson, and I'm sorry. That there was a little halting, my talking about it, but it's partly because so many things came together when I read this lesson. The Deuteronomy, the Bible study that I've done in the Old Testament, the sense of community, the revelations in the Sentinel. I tried to bring that all together, and it just made it kind of long, and I apologize for that. But it was just such a revelation to me. It was such a rich lesson to have the healing, for example, appear in one section and continue in another section. I thought that was so neat. It was really a counter to the belief in sin, sickness, and death. Okay? Okay.